So if you're not sure which sunscreen is best for your skin type, whether it's oily, dry, or acne prone, or maybe how to avoid that eye sting we all get from sunscreen, or you just generally want to know the differences between the types of sunscreen we get, or want to understand better why you maybe break out or have a rash every time you apply your sunscreen, then you've come to the right place, because in this video I'll be talking all things sunscreen, as well as mentioning my top 5 sunscreens that you can get from Dischem and Clicks. And believe me when I say by the end of this video you will be well fed. So what is sunscreen and why do we need it? Think of it like this. Do you know in summertime when gents be parking their cars in the shade or under the trees or using the car shields to protect their car from the damage that can be caused by the sun? Same principle applies to us. Sunscreen is a product that basically absorbs the harmful UVA and UVB rays so that our skin doesn't have to. The only difference between our skin and a car is with a car you can see the damage taking place, and with our skin it's a little bit too late once the damage has been done in some cases. So what do I mean by that? For example, when it comes to dark spots or hyperpigmentation, our skin produces melanin as a form of protection. So once the UVA and UVB rays have triggered our skin will start producing more melanin as a form of protection. And when this happens, especially if you're someone who has maybe dark spots or acne, this can make it even more difficult to treat that specific dark spot or hyperpigmentation, and making it look or appear even darker than it really is. Another example of this would be if the UVB rays from the sun cause enough damage, this can lead to cancer. Or if the UVA rays do enough damage, this can lead to something we call photoaging, where the skin ages much faster than it should. And as if skincare is not complicated enough, we actually get different types of sunscreens, which are physical, chemical, and hybrid sunscreens. And to be honest, the best way to remember which is just by remembering your physical sunscreen. And the reason for that is because physical sunscreens only contain 2 filters, which is titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. So when you're going skincare shopping, just turn your sunscreen around, look at the ingredient list, and if you can see titanium dioxide and zinc oxide accompanied with other ingredients, then you know that this is a physical sunscreen. And if you're having a look and you don't see titanium dioxide or zinc oxide, then you know that this is a chemical sunscreen. And in the case where you see titanium dioxide and zinc oxide with other ingredients that look very chemistry and have extremely long names, then you know that this is a combination of both, which is a hybrid sunscreen. So let's get to know our physical sunscreens a little bit better. So physical sunscreens are more suited for those with sensitive skin or those who maybe break out or have rashes when using sunscreen. But just be careful and make sure that you don't have an allergy towards titanium dioxide, because sometimes this might be the case. So if you don't have an allergy to titanium dioxide, but when you're using sunscreens you do sometimes break out, then you want to try and use physical sunscreens. And how physical sunscreens work, so they basically absorb the UV rays and then release it as heat, but additionally they also reflect 5% of the UV rays, and this is where it gets its name from, because of that physical barrier that it kind of gives, and the advantages and disadvantages of physical sunscreen. So let's start off with the good. The advantages is, with physical sunscreen, they don't actually irritate or sting the eye as much. And as I mentioned, if you have sensitive skin, then physical sunscreen will be more beneficial for you because it only contains 2 filters, so this will be less irritating to the skin. And the disadvantages is that physical sunscreens do leave a white cast.
Why did you make such a promise? And now we are looking stupid. So what are we gonna do about it? Really and truly, is it fair to us?
But we are in 2022, and a lot of physical sunscreens nowadays are formulated in a way that they do not leave a white cast, or they have tinted sunscreens. Now, tinted sunscreens are also super beneficial because they contain an ingredient known as iron oxide. And iron oxide is beneficial to us, especially people of color, because they basically help in blocking the visible light. And in most cases, visible light is another ray that we get from the sun, sun is the one that actually causes and worsens our pigmentation and dark spots. I've made a post on Instagram about tinted sunscreen. If you want to know more about them, then please go ahead and check out my Instagram. Another disadvantage of physical sunscreen is that it can give a slight chalky feel when you apply it, and the reason for that is because physical sunscreens are powdered formulations, so you actually feel that graininess when you're applying it, and that's how you know if this is a really good quality physical sunscreen or not, because if it is a really good quality physical sunscreen, then you won't even feel that graininess. The texture is quite elegant. So I'm pretty sure you've also heard mineral sunscreen or inorganic sunscreen. Well, these are physical sunscreens, just with different names, and people use the one that they think best describes a physical sunscreen. So if you see physical sunscreen, mineral sunscreen, or inorganic sunscreen, just know that this is a sunscreen that contains two filters, which is titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. Same thing, different names. Two peas in a pod. And a little bit about chemical sunscreens. So chemical sunscreen have liquid filters, so they basically absorb the UV rays and then release it as heat. And the advantages and disadvantages of a chemical sunscreen is, with the advantages, the chemical sunscreens feel more elegant texture wise and are much easier and more preferred when you have to reapply them, and they also don't leave a white cast. The disadvantages of chemical sunscreens is that it can or might break some people out. So chemical sunscreens are also known as organic sunscreen. So if you see organic sunscreen, just know that this is a chemical sunscreen as well. And then we get our hybrid sunscreens, which is the best of both worlds, which is a combination of physical sunscreen and chemical sunscreens. And these are the more popular ones and the ones that you'll usually find at Dischem and Clicks as well. So what to look for on the packaging to know whether this sunscreen is a good sunscreen and worth your coin. So firstly, it should be broad spectrum. So somewhere on the package it should have UVA and UVB, and the reason for that is, with UVA, think of aging, because that's literally what it does. It ages us faster because it is the longer wavelength, so it can penetrate deeper into our skin, more specifically the dermal layer. So it can basically destroy the collagen and the elasticity, resulting in photoaging. So you want to make sure you get protection from that. Secondly, with UVB, think burn, because that's literally what it does. It burns our skin. It is a shorter wavelength, so it only penetrates the superficial layer of our skin, so the epidermal layer, and this is the wavelength that basically causes cancer. And if you look at the epidermal layer and the different names of the layers, you will notice different types of skin cancers we get are named literally after each of these layers. So this is where sunscreen becomes super personal. So if you're wearing sunscreen for the purpose of aging gracefully, then unfortunately, as tedious as it sounds, you're going to have to wear sunscreen indoors as well, because UVA can penetrate through windows. But if you're wearing sunscreen as a protective method, then it's okay not to wear sunscreens indoors, because UVB rays cannot penetrate through glass windows. And if you're wearing sunscreen for the purpose of pigmentation and dark spots, then yes, you're going to have to also wear sunscreen even if you're indoors, because visible light is the longest one out of all of them and is constantly around us. So next, what you want to look for is the SPF rating, and SPF stands for sun protecting factor and basically measures your burning time. So a good SPF has a minimum of 30 all the way up to 50. The differences between them is, with SPF 30 you get protection of 97%, whereas with SPF 50 you get protection of 98%. So the difference comes down to that 1%, and I know it might sound little, but in the long run that 1% does make a difference. So SPF 30 is good unless you have certain medical conditions such as dermatitis, sun allergy, or psoriasis, just to name a few. Then you want to look for an SPF of 50, or if you just want to use an SPF 50 for personal reasons, that's also fine. So those are basically the bare minimums that you want to look for when it comes to looking for a good sunscreen. But if you want to up your sunscreen game a little bit, then you'll notice that some brands actually contain the PA+ rating, and in my opinion this is really nice, and these are the sunscreens that I usually go for as well. And in Dischem and Clicks, I think there's only 2 sunscreens that actually offer the PA rating as well, and that is Roger Posay and Vichy Gucci. If I am wrong, please let me know in the comments below if there is other sunscreens that also have the PA rating. So the PA rating is basically a protection grade rating that measures UVA. So if you see 2 pluses, this is moderate protection, and 3 pluses or more, this is best protection. So if your sunscreen has both SPF and the PA rating, then you know that this is a hella good sunscreen and we're off to a good start.
Ooh, this is nice! Girl! All this is you right here? Okay.
And the last thing that you can check for to know whether your sunscreen is top tier sunscreen, then you can look for antioxidants. Somewhere on the package it will indicate that it contains antioxidants, or in the ingredient list you will find certain antioxidants. And the reason why antioxidants are great with sunscreen, whether it's paired up with sunscreen when you use a vitamin C in a sunscreen, or the sunscreen itself has an antioxidant, is because antioxidants help sunscreens perform much better. So how much sunscreen should you be wearing, and when should you wear your sunscreen? So here's the thing, right? During quarantine or COVID time, we're still in COVID time, but that COVID time, it was quite easy to tell people to wear sunscreen every 2 hours because everyone was sitting at home and it wasn't so much of a hassle to wear your sunscreen every 2 hours. But again, in reality, this is not practical at all, and I can guarantee you that people telling you to wear your sunscreen every 2 hours don't. So even if you don't wear sunscreen every 2 hours, don't beat yourself up or be too hard for yourself. One thing I can say is the best way to go about it is just wearing a sunscreen twice a day. So in the morning before you go to work, or before you go to school, or before you start your day, and then again maybe at 1 o'clock, because that's when in SA the UV rays are quite high, and this is also the time for lunch breaks. And another thing that you can do that I find extremely useful is if you have an Apple device, I'm not too sure about Androids, but on the weather calendar, if you scroll down, you will find the UV index. And the UV index is basically a measurement by the World Health Organization, and it will literally tell you use sun protection, because the rating goes from 0 all the way to 11. From 0 to 2, you can actually go outside without using any sunscreen, but I mean, just wear your sunscreen. And then from 3 till 6 maybe, this is a definite must to wear sunscreen. And then from 6 and more, then you should try and stay as much as possible out the sun. So if you're struggling with reapplying your sunscreen, then you can use your UV index on your phone to just guide you on when you should be wearing a sunscreen. So how much sunscreen you should be wearing? So there's a lot of factors that go into the amount of sunscreen we wear. For example, with global warming, so the more global warming that we're exposed to, the more sunscreen we actually wear. So the amount of sunscreen is actually changes every maybe 2 or 3 years. But for now, the amount that you should be wearing for your face and neck is 2 grams, and this is equivalent to 2 fingers. The 2-finger rule was popularized by Tiara Williams. However, though, when it comes to the 2-finger rule, it is again a rule. And when it comes to skincare rules, they aren't really concrete facts, they're just guidelines that make it much easier and more fun to use. So if you have a bigger head, then 2 fingers might not be enough. And if you're using a liquid sunscreen, then 2 fingers again might not be enough. This all really depends on the type of sunscreen you're using and also the size that you need to cover. And you can use your own judgment, but with sunscreen, more is always better. So going from 2 fingers to 3 fingers to 4 fingers can never do you dirty, but try as much as possible not to underuse your sunscreen, because I know some people use liquid sunscreens and it's just like very tiny little lines, so that defeats the purpose. So again, just use your own judgment, and the 2-finger rule is a great guideline to understand whether you're using enough or you need to go a little bit more. And then when it comes to your body, you need to be using 36 grams, which is equivalent to 6 teaspoons. Like, just put on your sunscreen and call it a day. Honestly, when it comes to my body, I don't even measure the amounts. I just go on with my moisturizer and then my sunscreen on top, and we're calling it a day. At least you've got your sunscreen on. It's better than nothing. And that's another thing, don't beat yourself too much about how much you're wearing. You're supposed to know that all of that, because no one is wearing sunscreen 100% perfectly. So if you've got your sunscreen on, even if it's just you putting it on once a day, it's better than nothing, and you're doing a great job. keep going. So the biggest concern when it comes to wearing sunscreen is vitamin D deficiency. So wearing sunscreen, unless you're wearing sunscreen top to bottom, like you're literally being dunked in sunscreen, it has no ability to cause vitamin D. And the reason for that is we will get vitamin D on other parts of our bodies that we did not apply sunscreen. For example, I have braids, so I will get the vitamin D through my scalp, maybe other parts of my body that I've missed. And an interesting thing is vitamin D is actually quite common, especially in South Africa, specifically Black people, because of our pigment. So every 1 in 5 South Africans actually have vitamin D deficiency. I'm that 1 out of the 5. And if you're seriously serious about your vitamin D, then you can go to the doctor and ask them for a prescription labeled vitamin D. That was a literal one-on-one brief on sunscreen. And now to the fun part, which is my top 5 sunscreen and how I decided on the sunscreen. It was based on texture, whether it leaves a white cast or not, whether it stings the eyes or not, and if it's convenient to reapply again.
Okay, let's go.
Starting off at number 5, we have the Sun Protect SPF 30 face cream. So this is a chemical sunscreen. As you can see in the ingredient list, it doesn't contain any zinc or titanium dioxide. It also doesn't contain any alcohol, and alcohol is great in sunscreen, especially for those with oily skin, because it gives that nice mattifying effect. But this makes the perfect sunscreen for dry and combination skin because of its thick creamy texture, which I honestly living for. When it comes to fragrance, there's not a specific scent that I can pick up when I am using this sunscreen, but it does sting the eye a little bit. And if you're trying to achieve the whole glazed donut glass skin, then this is the sunscreen, because trust me, it gives you glazed. And since we're going into winter, this is probably a highly recommended sunscreen to use in winter because it's so thick, a little bit too thick for summer.
And next we have the Nivea Sun SPF 50, of course. So I was literally fighting for the last bit of the sunscreen that I could get. This has a very cream texture, but it is meant for those with oily skin because it does contain, alcohol, so it gives that mattifying effect. It does spread quite easily, but it does burn the eyes. It does have a very strong sunscreen smell as well. It reminds me of being in the pool when I was younger, full of chlorine in the sun. That's the type of smell I get when I apply it, but it doesn't leave any white cast and gives a very seamless finish, and I haven't experienced any peeling using this sunscreen. And then we have the Eucerin Sun Protection SPF 50. This one is more for those with acne prone skin. It is a chemical sunscreen. As you can see, all the chemical sunscreen filters. It does also contain alcohol, denatured alcohol, for the drying matting effect, and it also contains glycerin, so it's not only mattifying but it's also hydrating to the skin as well. Texture wise, this is a very lightweight formulation, very liquidy and watery. This is literally the perfect sunscreen to use during summer. I really love it because it absorbs into the skin so elegantly, and it doesn't have that sunscreen smell that you get from other sunscreens as well, and it doesn't leave any white cast and gives a very seamless finish. I even decided to do the 2-finger rule for you guys to see how it looks, and with this type of sunscreen you can literally use so many fingers. It won't affect how the sunscreen actually appears cosmetically because it absorbs into the skin so well. However, though, out of all my favorite sunscreen, this one does sting and burn the eyes the most, so buyer beware, even though it's a beautiful sunscreen. And of course, Roger Posay and Thelia's range. I absolutely love this range. Starting off with the Ultra Protection, Ultra Resistant. This sunscreen is thick, and I mean thick. This is the perfect sunscreen to use during winter and for those with dry skin. It doesn't leave any white cast and doesn't have a very strong sunscreen smell to it, and you can easily apply this throughout the day. And the tinted fluid sunscreen is my favorite with dark spots and hyperpigmentation because it does have that iron oxide that protects us from the visible light, and it's also great for those with oily skin because it gives a beautiful matte finish. So So those are my top 5 sunscreens that you can find from Dischem and Clicks. If you're someone who enjoys toners and want to know all about toners, then make sure that you're subscribed to my channel and hit the notification bell below so that you're notified when that video is released. And if you're new, welcome to my channel by Sugar Pearls, where we talk all things skincare as well as my medical journey and just being human. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.